data and not opinions. So we have data collected, and it's a lot easier to make a decision based on that for the Board of Governors. Okay, Peter. So we also looked at our strengths and weaknesses, and we have a lot going for us. And much of it has to do with the diversity of the club. Peter and his staff, Chris Donato, Trish, very, very competent workers and people who really care about the club. So the culture is good. I think we have, the last few years, we've had a good waiting list. I'm familiar with the Woods Hole Golf Club down in Cape. They had 0 on their waiting list last year. So we have about 35 right now. It's been pretty consistent the last 3 or 4 years. The weaknesses is water retention is an issue. We use wells, but it appears that there may be even restrictions on wells. We have so many abutters that it's very difficult to make any changes to the course. Another issue we have to face is the irrigation system. It's about 20 years old. The useful life of it, who knows? The bad news is Winchester did replace their irrigation system about 2 or 3 years ago. It cost $3.1 million. Wollaston has a price of replacing theirs, which is 19 years old, of $4.1 million. The other issue we have is we've never really funded capital equipment and or had a special fund. It was all kind of in one big lump. And at the end of the year, if money was left over, we'd talk to Chris and he would buy a few things. And another constraint is that we're kind of small for an 18-hole golf course. 110 acres is pretty small. Typically, you're up at least 150. So making many changes is not easy. Any questions, Peter, so far?
No, we're all set.
Okay. All right. So let's move along. So one of the things we try to do is look at our membership and figure out who joins Bass Rocks and where our new members come from. And some of the reasons that people join clubs, one of the main, they say the main reason is health and wellness, that they realize is something to going out on the course or playing tennis. And another is social events, which I think in the last few years we've had tremendous success with that. And the value for their money. I think for the money that we charge for initiation fee and dues, the value that we provide is worth it. And I think you see that in our waiting list. Some of the problems maybe, but I think a lot of courses are like this. The median age for full and limited is 66 years old, and the average member's age is 63. More and more couples are joining the club, which is a good thing. The other thing is we kind of looked at reasons of why people joined Bass Rocks, and most were people that moved into the Cape Ann area, and the other group was people who have friends and they brought their friends over to play. And that's one of the things that we got to keep in mind is inviting guests, and at this time it's hard because of the tea times. The other reason is why people left there were only 4 people in the last 5 years that left because they were dissatisfied. The rest of them either left because they weren't using the club or that they moved away. Our attrition rate is averages about 6%, which is pretty typical in the market for other clubs. I'm getting these numbers mostly from Club Benchmarking, which we joined, so that we have a comparison with other clubs, so we kind of know where we stand. I will say that according to Club Benchmarking, who we had a webinar with, we stand in very good shape in comparison to a lot of clubs our size. One of the recommendations was to kind of market ourselves. And because of the nonprofit status, you have to be careful doing that, but we believe that we could do a brochure, and Peter's going to show you what it looks like. A few of the members put this together. So the plan is to put this around the city and also to the realtors and make sure that we have a healthy waiting list. You did a very good job. It's certainly the scenic views are great. All right, we'll move on, Peter. All right, so these were some of the recommendations for the golf course. Begin a maintenance equipment reserve fund of $100,000 to replace outdated equipment. And this would carry over from year to year. So, you know, Chris is very savvy in buying and purchasing equipment. And when you can buy or lease a number of different pieces of equipment, you get a much better deal. And what was happening before, we'd make a purchase, one purchase here or one purchase there. We're in the process of making plans for a new irrigation system. When that irrigation system goes in, who knows? But there's a design going on now. I believe it was about a $35,000 bill to get it going. One of the other issues is water retention. Maybe we can do something with the down the 18th hole. Maybe dredge that out and have more water retained there. Number 2, you probably all know the situation with that. We got approvals from the city that we can go ahead without having to get a special permit, conservation permit. And Chris has a design that we will publish soon. One of the things that I think we have to understand is the cost of some of this equipment. If you look in the long-range plan on page 25, 46,000, 49,000, 67,000, 32,000, these are just pieces of equipment. 67,000, 120,000, 210,000. Of course, that's a couple of more, it's not just one. But it's very expensive equipment and very precise equipment. Number 17 has worked out since we moved the tee over. We hired a company called Probable Golf, who lets you know the chance of balls going in certain directions, and moving the tee over seems to have helped. I know a lot of people said we should have bought that house on 17, but I don't agree with that at all. It was about $750,000. We've got about $3.5 million in debt now, and they said we could rent it, but if you rented it, you would run into the same problem that it has now. The people can't enjoy it if balls would still be going in the yard, so you still have the same problem. The golf course has about 22,500 rounds per year, so we're about to capacity.
Paul, I'll add that if we keep up going at this rate, we'll be at 30,000 rounds. I mean,
Really?
I'm not saying 30, but we've been full every day on the tea times, which is
Yeah.
right now 140 rounds a day. And with the new tea times coming up, it'll be up to 180-ish. So,
All right. So it's we're using the course. One of the issues too that was brought up by the USGA came and inspected the property is that our cart paths are a mess. They're not wide enough and they're really in poor shape. And one of the recommendations we had was to repair two paths a year. To give you an idea of how expensive it is, the cost to replace the cart path on number 2 is $40,000. Okay, Peter, if you want to move along to the clubhouse. So, the clubhouse and food and beverage service. So what we wanted to do was begin a capital funding mechanism to pay for, make sure that the clubhouse stays in good condition. And later on, I'll show you all the different items that go into that. One of the things that we wanted to do is continue the level of functions that we have now, where we make some money, but we're not keeping the members out of the clubhouse every weekend. That, who knows what's going to happen. The Wollaston Golf Course just had 16 weddings canceled that they were counting on. A lot of clubs, that's where they make their money, banquet facilities and functions, but it hasn't been a huge deal with us for a moneymaker. The other thing is we outsource our food and beverage to Goodman Hospitality, and we receive 7%, plus we receive any unused food assessment. That is about $30,000 a year. So some people say, well, maybe the club should do the food service. So I have a couple of handouts here that show you what happens. And remember, food and beverage service at a golf club is an amenity and it's not a restaurant. So Peter, if you want to pop. If you look at, this is a survey of food and beverage profit or loss for 26 clubs. And the bottom line that's in bold, that you see down the bottom, there's Club A, B, I didn't put their names in, I didn't think it was right to, but Club A, B, C, D, E, and F make a profit. And then they start to lose money, the rest of the clubs. If you scroll along, you will see that Club M lost $114,000. Peter, go down to the next group. This is shocking. Club Y lost $500,000 in food and beverage service. Club X, which I'm familiar with, they lost $483,000. So we make 78.5 last year. I think the catering service is working out fine, and I think it's the way to go. It's a very risky business of hiring your own chef and service people. All right. We are headed to club financials. So in the past 5 years, Full member dues increased an average of 2.7% or $87 a year. The limited was 3.1% or an average of 70. Those, if we keep on that track, Bruce will show later that it won't be good. That's, we need to raise the dues. I will show you that our dues are really, we offer a good deal. And, but you can't keep offering a good deal because the quality of the course is going to go down because we don't have the money to maintain it. Our initiation fee went in 2018 from $7,000 to $10,000. It hasn't stopped any decline in membership or waiting list. It doesn't seem to be an issue. I think that's what sets us apart from a lot of private clubs is that it's an investment, but it's not a huge investment. I'll show you a little later what other clubs are paying. We are low in our dues and assessments and the initiation fee, and that's why it's a good value. We also looked at the categories of membership and how much they were paying for things, and we made sure that it's fair. And there were some in the bylaws, there were certain things about who had to pay what, and we made sure that that coincides now. We also added a capital reserve fund. So, Peter, if you want to show. So if you look at the full membership, you'll see that our dues are $3,905. This is for 2020. This is this year. Clubhouse assessment stays the same. We think of that as a capital assessment because it does pay for the financing of the clubhouse. Should say that there's a long story, I believe, with the clubhouse assessment. It was a $5 million loan, a little over, and to pay off that loan, the fee or the principal and interest payment should have been $475, but to get it passed, they felt that they couldn't go any higher than $300. But that does not cover the interest in principal. The food assessment's fair. Food assessments are used to motivate people to go and dine at the clubhouse. And, you know, we're kind of low there. A lot of them, it's $100 a month all year long. The 5th and 6th assessment will end this year. It's, I think there's just about $67,000 left, and we're going to make that payment, and that will be done. And then we added a capital fund assessment. The reason the capital fund assessment is supposed to be at $250, but it was put to $115 because of 5 and 6, $135. So if you add the two together, it's $250. But next year it'll be just 5 and 6 will go away, and the capital fund assessment will be $250. Okay. Want to go to the next one, Peter? So this is some clubs from the region, and let's take, if you look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column, initiation fees. So Vesper is $5,000. Framingham is $9,000. They're the only two in Massachusetts that are lower than us. Kernwood used to be around 30, but they lost a lot of members, so they're creeping back up. They're 15,000. And once you get to Oakley, Tedesco, Woodsole, Concord, it's in the 30s and 40,000s. And if you want to scroll down a little bit further here,
Sorry, hold on.
You'll see that Myopia is 60, Belmont is 60, Hyannisport 75, Sankaty Head is 100,000, Wellesley 72,000. So I think that 10,000, boy, is a deal for a lot of people, and I think people realize it. If you could scroll back up, Peter. So if you go over to the dues, our dues are $3,900. Kernwood is 10,000. Cohasset, 10,000. Oakley, 7,666. You get down to Essex, in the Shoddock, in Pine Brook, you're in the 13s and 18,000s, 12,000, 16,000. Belmont is 16,000 in just dues. If you look just to the right, Belmont's the last one down that you can see. If you look to the right of that, those are the capital assessments. Our capital assessment will be $250. Those are the capital assessments that the other clubs pay. Note that Belmont pays $5,500 in capital assessments. Peter, if you want to scroll down a little more, and you can see that a lot of the clubs, the dues are 14,000, 16,000, 12,000, 8,000. Okay, if you could go back up again and let's look at the capital assessments. The capital assessments, and then capital assessments is for equipment, facilities. The minimum charges is food. So we're at $300, what, $325 for food. A lot of the clubs, it's about $100 a month for the whole year. The most every course does have a capital assessment, and almost every private course has food charges too. Okay, we can move along. So the club borrowed $5.2 million to build the clubhouse. The interest rate was adjusted a number of times. However, the note is due in November 2022. Originally, we figured the balloon payment in 2022 was going to be $3.7 million, but we had paid extra principal payments for 6 years, so that'll reduce it by $480,000, which is a good thing. We stopped making those additional payments because we were paying the interest out of, I believe, our general budget, and we were running in the red sometimes, so we decided to stop that. The clubhouse assessment is $300 per year, but that assessment doesn't cover the principal and interest. And we're cautious on refinancing. There's a possibility that we can refinance now, but we're nervous about the cost of the irrigation system, and to separate it out to a huge assessment is maybe not the way to go. So that's going to be a tough decision down the road. 5 and 6 will end this year. And I think we paid, what was it, $135? That didn't cover the principal and interest either. Okay, Peter, if you want to move on. So the recommendation is to have a capital reserve fund and have a golf reserve analysis and kind of take a look at what we have for equipment, how much square footage we have for carpeting, for roofing, how many heating systems, all those things, the netting around the 17th hole and the practice area, the kitchen equipment, the furniture outside, the furniture inside. So I did that, and we'll show you a little bit later. And what we're thinking is the best way to go is a proactive strategy. These things have to be replaced. They only have a short useful life. So we are going to set aside money to replace them. And that's called a proactive strategy. A reactive strategy is where, well, when it pops up, you pay for it. And it leads to assessments and debt. So the plan is to start a capital reserve fund. And like I said, it's kind of low, actually, $250 per year. But if you don't reinvest in your club, it goes downhill real fast. And that's, a lot of us go to public courses and you say, they should have flowers here, or this looks like it really needs to be repaired. And that's how you start to lose members. So we're really trying to make sure that we keep what we have maintained and repaired, because things happen. And we haven't put money aside in the past, so now we're trying to do it. Why don't you move on, Peter?
Is that what we want, Paul?
Yeah, go to the next one.
Oh, sorry. Getting there.
Not moving?
There we go.
Okay, so funding capital improvements through operating profit is almost impossible to do. One of the recommendations is to have two budgets, a capital budget and an operating budget. Capital budgets are long-term, operating budgets go 1 year at a time, so there is a difference. Club benchmarking, which I mentioned before, is that company. It's actually started by a guy at Thorny Lee, who was on the board of governors. And they were just making decisions. And he goes, this is not the way to do business. So he started this company called Club Benchmarking, where he gets all this data. So at least you know what other clubs are doing and you can make sensible recommendations. Club Benchmarking recommends that you increase that capital assessment 3.5% per year. Basically, they're saying that your capital income should come from initiation fees, capital dues, assessments, or investment income. Some courses included in their dues, they don't have a designated capital assessment. Of course, initiation fees is difficult. They can change from year to year. We've been fortunate that people are still joining Bass Rocks Golf Club. So we can move on to the next one, Peter. So this is our thoughts. To have 3 categories for the capital reserve. The facilities is $100,000 per year. Now, this is not maintaining it. It's a reserve fund to replace equipment, roof, siding, carpeting, whatever. A capital reserve fund for the golf course of $60,000. That would be, cart pass, new tees. It's not the maintenance equipment. The maintenance equipment is down the bottom, and that's the third one, and that's $100,000 a year. So if you go to the next document, Peter. No, it should be a handout, Peter,
Yeah,
with
okay.
the
Got
reserve
it.
replacement. Okay, so I did this, and what I did is, if you look at it, it's over on the left-hand side, let's say the roof, clubhouse, pro shop, maintenance building, the house. And what it does is how many units you have, flooring, carpeting in the clubhouse, pro shop, downstairs carpeting. Scroll down a little bit, Peter. Notice that there's nothing for irrigation except mechanical pump. It's almost impossible to figure out how much that's going to cost. So that was not part of this. However, the pumps were part of this. Kitchen equipment, parking lot replacement, outdoor furniture, maintenance equipment. You could scroll down some more. Heating and cooling, range netting, and well maintenance to be determined. So what happens is you scroll back up the top, Peter, please. It tells you a useful life, how much it costs to buy it new. If you take into account inflation, and eventually it goes to how much you should put away each year to account for these things. If you look in actual reserves column, you'll see there's nothing there. We've never really put money aside. So therefore, we've had a shortage for years. So that $100,000 for facilities is trying to make up for lost time. You know, the clubhouse is 10 years old now, so I don't know. I look at the shingles. I don't think they're going to last 30 years, but we'll see. So this was that's how we came up with $100,000. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Bruce Bowes, and he will explain his part. Bruce?
Thanks, Paul. So just before I kind of get rolling here, I want to make a couple of initial comments. One is I want to thank Paul for the leadership that he's provided in this. Really, this is a pretty substantial, big change for the way that we think about things, and really being proactive and think about things on a long-term basis is the way to go. I think that it's wonderful stewardship of the club during his tenure, and I think he's got something started here that we're just going to be able to continue to roll on. So, Paul, thank you. Second point is that, before I really dive into some of the nitty-gritty of this, I want to make the comment that the club has always been well-run financially. Bob Shea, Mike, the team have always done a great job of keeping us above water and taking care of the needs that are there. So there isn't anything I'm going to say should be taken as a negative reflection on anything that's been done in the past. What we're just trying to do now is, as Paul had articulated, we're trying to move from a reactionary scenario into a proactive scenario so that we can better look over the next 5 years or so, potentially identify elements that are going to come up and then deal with them on a proactive basis so we're not stuck later on with a lot of big surprise special assessments. And my third kind of introductory comment is that, with plans like this, people say, well, how can you really look out 5 years and really know what's going to go on here? And the truth is you can't really. But what you can do is you can project to the best that you possibly can. The closer you get, so within the next 12 months, you should have a pretty good idea what you're doing. 2 years, it's not too bad. As you get out of 5, there's a lot of speculation there. But it's not really about the plan. It's the planning process. It's not the plan, it's the planning. And by virtue of the fact that you're sitting down and thinking about these things lots of different stuff pops up that you've got to think about 3 to 5 years down the road that could influence the thinking that you're having today. So one particular example that Paul highlighted was, do we refinance Clubhouse today? Well, that might be an easy answer relative to the current interest rate environment, but it gets complicated when we look at the other expenditures. For example, some potential with the irrigation system that we may have to do over the next few years. So, this plan and the numbers that you see are in constant revision. The numbers that have been sent as a part of the plan were out of date virtually the minute we sent them. Certainly, they've been updated for 2020's budget, which of course got thrown out the window the minute COVID-19 hit the market for us. So we're constantly rebudgeting, re-looking at it, but instead of just looking at it on an annual basis, we're trying to anticipate things over the next 5-year or so horizon. So when we started this process, just a few initial observations that we made. One is that our operating expenses exceed our operating income. Now, everybody knows that at the end of 2018, we said, well, we made $300,000. But what we don't know is that we balanced that budget based on using the initiation fees and the interest that we were earning on the money that's in the bank. So using the initiation fees is all well and good right up until you hit a recession when nobody signs up. So, what we've done is gone back, looked at the number of people that we've had historically signing up. We've taken a 5-year weighted average of that. We've assumed that as our baseline and left ourselves some room on the upside if we are able to get some more people than our initial plan, and that can go into the coffers to help with defer some of the future expenses as well. Second one is income from non-recurring operations. Interest initiation fee has been used to balance the budget, as I just mentioned. I talked about getting to cash flow positive. I mentioned in 2018, we talked about a $300,000 profit, which is accurate. But when you look at it from a cash basis, we actually only generate about $65,000 in cash because a P&L doesn't take into account those things that we invest in capital product or necessarily depreciation. Now, in a lot of cases, what we've done in order to balance the budget has been we have not reinvested the depreciation back into the club. Instead, we've depleted our assets, and that's led to us really eroding the equipment that we have. And as Paul had mentioned, we haven't set money aside for to redo a number of things around the facilities and a lot. Forget making improvements to clubs, strictly maintaining what we have. And then Paul also commented through a number of areas that the assessments don't cover the cost of the expenses for capital projects. Whether it was Clubhouse or 5 and 6, we've been consistently or the bar, we've been consistently taking money out of the savings account or out of our profits for the year to fund some of these things. It's a legitimate strategy. It certainly gets you from one year to the next. But as you try to look forward and plan, you're making some very big assumptions about continue to achieve certain revenue from non-recurring operations. So next one, Peter. So if you look at where we were, on the basis of the types of increases that we had with the dues that Paul showed you before, and looked at the path that we were on, in 2019, which was budgeted at the time, we expected to have 828,000, down from 2018. A big part of that was the contribution that we made towards the bar. But if you look into the future and you look at 2023, we were really living on borrowed time. So we'd have been down to somewhere around $560,000 by the end of 2023, continuing to deplete our cash. So some things had to be done. Next slide, Peter. So the new plan really emphasizes management of cash flow as opposed to P&L. Small business management best practices is everybody just watches the cash. You know, a P&L becomes something that you do for tax purposes and the like. Certainly a valid thing to look at, but you know, it's the cash that you're spending versus what you're taking in that provides a much more accurate picture of your true financial position, along with the considering the impact of capital investment. So as a part of what we wanted to do, we wanted to close that gap between operating expenses and revenues. I think you've seen with some of the changes that we made for 2020 budget that we've started to close that gap. I wish we could say that it was better, but we're still working along those lines. I do want to reassure everyone that Charles and Tim and everybody else on the finance committee is working hard, looking at the expense side of things, not just the revenue side of things, to try to get as much bang for the buck as we possibly can. Third, we want to be less reliant on non-recurring funding, interest, and initiation fees. If we exceed expectations, then we can treat that as money that we can go and make additional investments in improving the club or set it aside for rainy days. But what we want to do is make sure we don't get into a situation where we hit a bad year and all of a sudden we're dipping into our capital reserves, the cash that we've got on hand, to be able to make up a difference because we didn't sell enough new memberships per se. And then finally, as Paul had mentioned, we want to proactively allocate money towards capital improvements, allowing for better operational planning by the managers. I think that the example that Paul used of letting Chris rely on having a certain budget every year that he knows he's got to spend will allow him to go out and strike better deals for equipment. If he's able to buy 3 pieces at a time or sign longer term leases, 3 to 5 year leases, knowing that he's going to have money coming in, he's ultimately able to negotiate better prices on pieces of equipment than one at a time, and not being able to commit to long-term leases. So, and then finally, we ultimately want to establish reserves for emergencies. So the club has committed to a $500,000 of the cash that we have there, maintaining that for emergencies scenario, but then also setting aside that the money that Paul talked about, that $100,000 a year for equipment, $60,000 for the course, and certainly in a lot of cases we'll be overspending. But then also the $100,000 for the facilities elements that we need to save now, so that we don't see super large assessments in the future. So, next one, Peter. Okay, so with those kinds of changes that have been made and the improvements in looking at capital, but the budget changes that have been made that Paul's talked about, the relatively small increase in dues that we made this year, the establishment of the capital assessment, we're able to project at the end of 2019 being able to maintain ourselves in that 900, or we came in 2019 at around 904,000. 2023, we're still projecting to have over 900,000 in cash available for us to be able to work with. So as opposed to the 560,000 that we had as we were looking at depleting. Peter, do you want to call up the spreadsheet just for a second? So, you know, I don't want to go through this in detail, I'd be glad to walk anyone through it individually who'd like to do that offline. But I think it's important that you take a look down through each one of the line items here. The operating revenue that we've got, we're not just looking at one line item. We're not just looking at dues. But we're looking at all the various areas that we generate revenue from. We're trying to make sure that the costs of members are fair and comprehensive as we look at our total bill. But we also look at what goes on with food assessment. Paul had a very substantive discussion about that. Not just the assessments, but what we do with retaining Goodman versus doing it on site to make sure that we're generating the maximum amount of bang for our buck and generating the most revenue that we possibly can. As we drop down into expenses, you'll notice that there's only a couple of line items here, but we in the finance committee get into all of the gory detail of every line item under those two very generalized categories. You will notice that in the line item there, net increase in net assets from operations, that we continue to run negative. It does continue to get a little bit worse as we go on, and that's fundamentally because our expenses are going up faster than our revenues are. So that's still something we're going to have to address in the future, but for the next 5 years, we should be pretty much okay. Looking at the kinds of initiation fees and interest income that we should be able to generate from the money that we have in the bank. So continue to scroll down there, Peter, if you would. So just letting you know also, we're looking at the various expenditures. We've got the income from 5 and 6 and the clubhouse fees. We look at the debt that's associated that we're paying off with things. And then ultimately, we also look at the additional capital investments that we have to make, both now, but also because of the work that Paul did to look at the facilities on item by item basis, we're able to get a much better representation of what our expenditures are over the next several years. Same thing on the equipment side, because we've now allocated $100,000 a year to Chris. He knows what he's got to spend, what we've got to work with. We're able to have a higher degree of confidence that in terms of what we're going to expend there. But we're also going to be able to give him equipment that he needs to run the course and maintain it in the kind of condition that we've all become accustomed to. So Peter, keep scrolling down there if you would, please. The line items here that talk about unrestricted cash and equivalents at the end of the year are really where we intend to end up as we kind of move throughout the year. There's reserves and unrestricted cash end of the year. Those are our projections, and we should be in pretty good shape. Back to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
I got a couple of questions, Paul, on that from somebody out there. So they're wondering, how can a 250-year capital assessment be enough? And they want to show projection of capital spending and how the assessment, together with anticipated initiation fees, will cover that spending and build a reserve. It seems like it would need 20 to 25-year view. I think that next slide has that, right?
With the
updated?
Well, what the question is it that the $250 is not enough?
Yeah, sort of. That's what he's asking. But I think on our updated, don't we have an updated slide that shows what the impact is, or no?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, if you Peter, put the presentation back up again. So, here, at least through the next 5 years, we're able to maintain the cash that we have in and cover the capital expenditures that are anticipated over the next 5 years. Now, that doesn't deal with that deals with being able to maintain the club the way that it is. That doesn't deal with being proactive about things. So, for example, it doesn't deal with putting in an irrigation system and the like. But we have been able to project the costs of maintaining various equipment, being able to maintain the facilities, and we're pretty comfortable that we're going to be able to, well, 250 doesn't cover the whole thing. We are taking it out of the additional fees that we generate through initiation, interest, and the like. It's the entire revenue side of the balance sheet. We're able to at least maintain the cash. Is it enough to cover all of the expenditures? No, we are continuing to use additional funds. But as said, this is a consistent rebudget, reevaluate, and look at the things that we need to do on a regular basis.
You could probably say that, yeah, it maybe should be more, and ultimately it probably will be more. But we're trying to, especially under these conditions, trying to work with people to retain their membership. A lot of people are out of work and things. So I know this was prepared before this virus, but we didn't want to jump too quick and too high, and we'll just see what happens in the next couple of years.
Another question for you guys on the chart. They said, I didn't see the refinancing of the clubhouse balloon in the Excel sheet. Did I miss it, or is that being dealt with in a different way?
Yeah, that's a fair question. What you should see in the Excel spreadsheet should be the continued payments that we're making. The reason that Mike and Bob and the guys have been making additional payments along the way was to try to drive that principal down far enough that as we refinance, we're able to maintain our principal and interest payments roughly where they are. Now, where do we exactly end up? Won't know until we get there, but right now the current projections from the Finance Committee are that we will be able to refinance at a rate and a length that will allow us to at least maintain principal and interest payments where they are today. So that has been looked at and considered.
Yeah, to add to that, I don't think we expected interest rates to be this low this long. And, we were projecting that even if it went up, I think, Bruce, to 7%, we would still be able to make the payments at the same level.
That's correct, Paul. So with a little bit of luck, once we decide what we're doing with irrigation and the like, we might even get a little bit of benefit out of that to help with irrigation. But we'll have to see.
Sticking with
Interest
irrigation.
rates are changing so rapidly; it's hard to figure out exactly what's going to happen here.
Okay, sticking with that subject, the question was, is there consideration of replacing the irrigation system in phases, sections? A company may be very happy with a multi-year contract, 10 to 15 years, because of the financial stability it would provide. We want a performance bond if we went that direction. I can pretty much know the answer to that one. Paul, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, the company that everyone uses because you never know they were there. They're booked for 2 years in advance already. Is it 2 or 3 years, Peter?
It's 2 right now.
Yeah, so it's you kind of have to get on their list.
Yeah, and they're going to come right in and do it one time. To spread it over, you'd have the course in disarray for years.
Right.
And they're not going to make the commitment to come up here once a year and bring all their equipment and go through the process over and over again. And obviously, one of the comments was that always the unexpected rock. Well, we're already set in the ground already for most of the main pipes and valves. So we will definitely have some rock issues, but not like we did when we first put this in. And that's it for questions right now.
There's no more?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Want to go to the last slide?
Yep.
So obviously, the things have changed, and all of us have been going on some webinars to just kind of think about the implications of what can happen because of this virus and the shutdown. And these are possible things. We just don't know. I mean, we don't know from one day to the next, what's going to open and what's going to close. But a lot depends on how long or short term this is. It appears that it's shorter term than maybe we thought, that things will start to open up and loosen up and we can go back to somewhat normal. If the virus rebounds, it's maybe a long-term duration. The impact on membership is a concern. Members' personal financial status. I mean, if they got to put food on the table and have a place to live, so we have to kind of see with that. We are working with members on payment plans without interest on their dues, so that they can stay members and just don't have to pay it all at once. A lot of this is, what's going to happen to the competition. We're certainly affordable compared to some other private clubs around here that you're paying $40,000 and $50,000 for initiation fee. You're paying $10,000 in dues, and I think we're in a favorable situation in that we're not that expensive and we're private and we're a quality club. But it does show you that the international club closing is certainly a wake-up call. The word is the golf industry is very volatile, and you just things can happen real fast, as we found out. The other issue is these tee times. Will they continue? The good news was they reduced it to 12 minutes between groups for next week. But according to Peter, because I've never really been a member of a course where they had tee times, that 10 minutes is the typical one, and we could get so many more rounds in if we would go down to that. The impact on food and beverage income, how many people you can have at a function, the social events at the club. One of the good things with us is that we are not dependent on a lot of functions. We make our money in dues, cart rentals, and gas fees mostly. So yeah, it'll affect us, but maybe not as much as other clubs that really depend on that. Matt and Paul with Goodman Hospitality, we are going to work with them this year on a monthly basis to see how they're doing. We're not going to let them go broke doing this because of this situation. We're going to work with them and be fair. And I know with from knowing them, they're going to try their best to make this thing work. But they make a lot of money through the beverage sell of beverages, and you just can't get that congregation of people. You're not going to see buffets anymore. So one of the things to consider is maybe alternative use of the clubhouse. How can we use it more effectively? So there's a lot that has to be decided in the future of, how to make up for some money. We'll just have to see. And hopefully this thing will end and Bass Rocks will go back to not only a great club, but, socially, just a nice place to be. So if there are no more questions.
I have another one, Paul.
Yeah.
Comment, I guess. Someone says club amenities in such clubs like Wellesley are obviously a head and shoulders above Bass Rocks, and it's best to compare Bass Rocks with clubs that are similar.
Well, I had a list of, there's not really a lot similar to us, to be quite honest. Um, you know, for what you get for the money. So those are my lists. Um, you know, I will tell you this, a club that has a swimming pool has to fix it for $800,000. They're expecting to do their irrigation system for $4.1 million. And they just updated their clubhouse at $12 million. So we're in pretty good shape, I think, here. But I mean, if you want to compare us to Framingham, I mean, Kernwood is probably, what do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I don't know if we used to look at, some other clubs like Marshfield, and, Framingham. We're looking at the dues and what they pay over the year. And like you said, it's a tough mix, especially around up here in this area with the Myopias and the Essex and the Turner Hills and the Renaissance. Those are in a different tier, and they have more for the members, and that's why they pay more. And everyone's just got to remember that we're a golf club. We're not a country club. We have 3 tennis courts, beautiful clubhouse, and, a great golf course.
Yeah, one of the things, is millennials and getting younger people to join. And they probably have an advantage in that the kids can go swimming at the club and all that. And we don't offer that. But I don't think we're headed in that direction. First of all, we don't have the space, and I don't think the membership wants that kind of a country club atmosphere at this time anyways.
I never was a lifeguard, Paul, so they're going to have to find another one if they do that.
Well, someone told me you were a good swimmer, but I guess you weren't.
All right, I guess that's it.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll get through this.
And just a reminder, we're going to do in the same type of format. Next Thursday, we have a informational meeting, a special meeting for the bylaw proposals that you should have got. And on the annual meeting on the 25th, we'll be doing the same format. Looks like I got a question and answer here. No, it's not a question and answer. It's just saying applaud to all the hard work and time, Paul and Bob. Really thoughtful. One idea for the clubhouse is just to do everything as sit down with reservations in the short term and expand the nights for dinner night. We can certainly keep people apart in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Which is true. Right now, they're not letting us in, but obviously that will be the case once they do let us in, which will probably be phase 3, which is going to be at least another 3 weeks from now.
I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It'll take time, but we'll figure it out.
They want another question is in relation to using the club more effectively. Is there a way to use it in the off season for functions? I will say that we are open on the winter, in the off season for functions. We tried to give the specials for the winter weddings and things like that, which is really not much of it going on. We do have a few companies that come in and do weekly meetings, so that helps. And we're always looking around for local companies having their Christmas parties and things like that.
Maybe, one of the issues is marketing, too. Laura's done a good job with that, but a lot of competition around Gloucester.
Yeah. I mean, if someone, just an example, if someone wants to go to the Gloucester House, that, we have to make some money on it. We have to charge a hall rental where they're not going to do that. They're just going to charge you for the food because they own the place. So it's a little different situation. But once we get through this, I think things are going to pick up. Just need some time. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we'll see you on the golf course. Have a good night.